way we as humans interact and give ourselves purpose in this world is through stories. However, there's been a new addition to this realm of storytelling that I'm really excited about. So let's talk about that today. Stories are stories, and they've been around forever. In fact, they can be traced back all the way to 2000 BC to the Epic of Gilgamesh, which is the oldest written story to date. They exist holistically in every culture, every civilization, and every historical period ever. Their existence is a constant. However, what isn't a constant is the form that they take. Stories started in the format of images, really, with cave paintings. It then moved on to the spoken word, which is still strong today in cultures like the indigenous people of Australia. However, the format didn't stay static. We then invented written language, which was a combination of visual and spoken storytelling. Then theatre, then music, then dance, then all three of those together. Then jump forward thousands of years and we have photography, moving pictures, radio, television, film, and so on until 1972, when we were given gaming. The format of the story is a constantly developing concept, and what I wanted to look at today is what makes gaming so unique: its dimensions. To simplify this whole discussion, I'm going to simplify the art forms into linguistic art, visual art, music, performance, film, and video games. Now, these art forms have dimensions, not tangible ones that you can see and feel, but metaphysical ones. And this is not a format of ranking the different art forms or saying one is more complex than another. In fact, the different dimensions that an art form has available to itself is what makes it so unique and gives it its special abilities. To begin with, I believe that linguistic, visual, and musical art forms are one-dimensional forms of art. This is because they traditionally appeal to a single sense. This is what makes this art form so unique and gives writers like Douglas Adams their power in the format. His writing style thrives off his format and works entirely off the assumption that we cannot see what he sees, and the only window we get into his world is through the words that he gives us. So the window that he provides us is unique and obscure. This is what brings all of the originality and comedy to Douglas Adams' writing. Not the comedy, not the story, not the events, but the way he explains them and the brush that he chooses to paint his world. Performance art is two-dimensional because it begins to combine a large amount of art forms. You have the spoken word incongruence with human movement and music and visual art and anything else that you want to add to the scene. It is the culmination of multiple art forms into a single production. This allows it to create more detailed and complex images for the audience, which allows us to have a clearer idea of what's happening within the narrative. However, this combination of multiple art forms with the addition of human movement gives a director more and less freedom. Yes, he can show us more, and yes, he can be more explicit with the scene that he's painting, but he also has less freedom. Everything we see has to be possible in the physical realm, and we choose where we look. We as an audience have an ability to guide our own line of sight wherever we like. The director has less of a holistic and powerful brush like Douglas Adams has. Film is three-dimensional, and this is because it has access to everything that theatre traditionally does, but with the addition of one other concept. The third dimension is extremely subtle, but it's there and it makes a huge difference. It's editing and the frame. In theatre, there's no ability to cut. Whip cam, smash cut, jump cut, match cut, any of those techniques aren't available to theatre, and you can't change between scenes that quickly. You also have the ability to pan and guide the line of sight. Furthermore, you have awesome directors like Edgar Wright, who do fantastic stuff with things entering and leaving the frame. You can also see the use of the reveal in works like 2001: A Space Odyssey by Stanley Kubrick. They use the frame to pan across a room and reveal something that has been there the entire time, but unbeknownst to the audience. The frame gives the director the ability to guide the line of sight. It also gives the director the power of perspective and allows them to be very specific in the way that we see a scene. And editing allows a director to cut between different scenes very quickly, cut between perspectives, characters, events, and dice up and make a more dynamic scene to a far greater extent than theatre. The frame is a whole new playground to play with that every art form doesn't have access to except for film. Now, of course, this structure isn't as rigid as I'm making it out to be. Sometimes theatre can do things inspired from film, sometimes visual art can be more than one-dimensional. There are plenty of times where the lines are blurred. However, every art form thus far has been lacking in one thing: the fourth dimension. And I really want to see it being used more in AAA games. I'm talking about gameplay mechanics, which are a way of making a game fun or different or obscure, especially in puzzle games like Empty. However, it is also a way of telling a story. It is a new, subtle, but brilliant way of conveying an internal struggle, a thematic moment, or a character's inner mentality. A great example of this being used in a AAA game is the recent release of Battlefield 1. More specifically, in its spectacular opening. At the very beginning, you are given these words, which are a fantastic way of segueing into the themes that the game is about to introduce to you. Without any context, you're immediately launched into combat, fighting off hordes of enemies until your ammo runs thin. Eventually, you will die. However, instead of respawning or moving on, you're given a name and a date of birth and death. Then, you're on a mounted machine gun, fighting off another horde of enemies, and you're killed. Name, birth, death. Then in a church with a shotgun. Name, birth, death. Then in a tank. Name, birth, death. Then in the trenches. Name, birth, death. In every Battlefield game thus far, you play as the hero who has surmounted incredible odds and survives in the end. This game very clearly establishes at the very beginning that there were no World War I heroes. There is a futility to every action, because when you die, there is no funeral. There is no meaning. You die in a sea of bodies. However, instead of killing nameless soldiers that mean nothing like in Call of Duty, in Battlefield 1, you're killing people who have names, birthdays, and death days. John McRae conveys this as well in his famous poem In Flanders Fields. In Flanders Fields, where poppies blow, between the crosses, row on row. Now, John conveys this in his own convention, using rhymes to emphasize his points and the concept of repetition, row and row twice, to demonstrate a futility and the sense of mass deaths. But in Battlefield, the same theme is conveyed. However, instead of dialogues or words or rhymes or repetition, it's conveyed through gameplay. The player is expected to die. There is no hope, there is no survival, and when you die, another one will take your place. Another great example, which I'll briefly cover, is The Last of Us. Remember that scene where Joel literally gets impaled? Well, what's interesting here is when you switch players. You move from playing as Joel to Ellie. That might be obvious as you go, well, I can't play as a half-dead man, but it's about the provider. You play as the most powerful and capable character in the game. So when the dynamic shift occurs from Joel to Ellie, not only is this told through the events and through the dialogue, but through the game. As you stop playing as Joel and start playing as Ellie. The dynamic shift that occurs is not conveyed through dialogue, imagery, symbolism, or the frame. It's conveyed through who you play as and the gameplay. This new fourth dimension has had a very powerful effect on me emotionally whilst playing games, and in my opinion, it is the most potent tool available to a storyteller. However, this is something that is entirely unique to the player, not the observer. And this new mechanic of conveying emotion is something that we need to embrace and explore. I'm really excited to see how this technique is going to be used in the future, and I hope you are too.